Alright, so let's see if we can actually get some input into our character. Now I got a Xbox controller plugged into my computer here, so I'm going to come in here to Project Settings. Come to Input. And let's add some axis mappings here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Axis Mapping. And I'm going to add a couple new ones right here. We'll call the first one Move Forward. And we'll call the second one Move Right. Now I don't want to get too deep into this because it's really not about scripting your character. It's more about scripting animation. I just want to get some basics down so we can control our character and actually wire in the animation. But what this is doing is it's basically saying these are the inputs for these events. Oops. Now the cool thing about this is that you can add multiple input devices depending on what you have. Now, as I mentioned, I have an Xbox controller plugged in here, but I can also add keyboard keys. So for example, keyboard, W key, and that would be moving forward. Now to move backwards, we use the S key, and then what we'll do is we'll scale it in -1 so he goes backwards. Now we don't have to scale in -1. For example, if we wanted them to go backwards, say half as fast, we can always scale it -0.5. There's nothing wrong with that. So then for my Xbox controller, I want to use the left thumbstick with the Y-axis. Now it doesn't have a direction on it. That is pulled in from the gamepad itself, so I don't have to do the -1 here for the opposite key. So then for the move right, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. Let's give it the A key. And now it's actually going to be to the left. And then the D key. That's to the right. And then for the move right, we'll use the gamepad X-axis. That would be the left thumbstick X-axis. And if you want a good example of this, just create a blank project and bring in like the third person project. These things are already set up. In fact, I'm using that as a reference, to be honest. So that should be enough to get started with. We can always add more later. But that should give us the ability to move left, right, up, and down. So now we have two events that we just created. And again, if we go back to the under input. So we have these, we created them by doing this, move forward and move right. So we now have two new events. So if we come in here and go add event, it should be in there. Let's go. There we go. Move forward. And then move right under axis events. There we go. So when we're moving forward, we want to So when we move forward, we want to add movement input. Now where does this function coming from? This is a built-in function. That's why I can't double click and go into it. And then down here, when we're moving right, we want to add movement input again. And again, now you're saying again how bringing things in the functions are, because then you can reuse it over and over and over again. So the scale value will be the axis value of either the keyboard or the joystick. And again, I'm just trying to get some basic motion in so we can get on to doing the animation blueprint scripting. This is not really a character scripting setup kind of class, so I'm kind of going through this rather quickly. And again, I'm using the standard third-person template as a reference for this. But what I am doing is I'm getting the pawn's rotation. So I can figure out which way it's facing. For moving forward, I want to use the get forward vector. So I wanted to add forward motion, and then for this, actually that should be like that. And then the same here for the get right vector. And we can test that. And nothing's happening. Okay, it took me some finagling and fussing with it a little bit. The mesh was spun around and I set up a custom camera to get this puppy to work. But now we hit the W key, we go forward, S key, we come backwards. We're going to side to side, and if you hit the other actor, notice he disappears because of that collision event. So there we have it. We have basic input coming into the character. Let's see if we can try it with the control pad, see if that also works. Yes, it does. Okay, so our character's moving around. And again, it took a little bit of finagling to get the settings just right to get it to work. I won't go into details because that really isn't the crux of what this tutorial is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for setting up the animation blueprint. This is just the prerequisite stuff. But just real quickly, I had to make sure he was facing forward because he was not by default facing forward where the arrow was representing. I added a camera attached to a spring arm, which basically means it follows the character, and I told it to use the pawn's control rotation and to not bother with collision, and then a few settings on the character movement node to get it to move as I wanted it to. So again, not the crux of this tutorial, just so you know that we got input, moving our character, and now with that working, we can move on to setting up animation blueprints.